There has been so much controversy surrounding sunscreens recently, and in particular a choice article that showed that a lot of sunscreens aren't quite living up to their SPF ratings, and one of those sunscreens is Ultra Violette. Now, I have been asked to comment on this multiple times, so I thought now would be a great opportunity to take a deeper look into the brand themselves, past controversies, successes, and kind of where they are today, with this pretty still current controversy going on. Also, I have a very recent update for you right at the end of this video. Ultra Violette have kind of been credited to introducing people to the term skin screens, and their rapid rise in popularity has of course hit a major speed bump in recent weeks. And in 6 years, they kind of gone from the skincare's cool girl SPF to facing serious questions about inclusivity, transparency, and whether their products actually live up to the hype. So I want to talk a bit more about how Ultra Violette was founded by two beauty industry insiders, how they became a cult favorite during the pandemic, and how it all started to get a little bit messy when accusations started flying about shade ranges, social media censorship, and even the legitimacy of some of their SPF claims. Chapter 1: Founding of the brand. Although Ultra Violette's success seemed to have happened overnight, the reality is very, very different. The brand didn't start out in like a flashy boardroom or with some angel investor pumping millions into getting the brand going, like a lot of modern skincare brands really. It all started with two women slowly building up years of experience in the beauty industry. Between them, founders Ava Chandler Matthews and Beck Jefford have worked at L'Oreal, Olay, Aesop, SK2, and many more throughout their careers. But it was at the Australian beauty retailer Mecca that the two met and formed a friendship. Beck was actually Ava's boss at Mecca, and both were involved in Mecca's in-house brands, managing product development, marketing, sales, and so on. Basically, they were learning exactly what it took to develop products, launch a new product line, and run a beauty brand. So it's no wonder that they thought they had the skills and knowledge to pull off their own beauty brand. And it was back in 2016 when they first had the idea for Ultra Violette. Working in the industry obviously helped them notice that there seemed to be a gap in the beauty market. Sunscreens at the time, I think especially in Australia, were mostly thought of as a functional product, something that would protect you from sun damage, but that wasn't fun to wear. And we know that from like the pasty old shit that we used to get everywhere in Europe. Before a lot of people discovered K-beauty, right? They felt like everything on the market was sticky, chalky, smelled gross, or didn't work well with makeup. It was only marketed as something that you kind of needed when you went to the beach or went hiking or did some other outdoor activity. It was more of like a tool than a beauty product. Marketed as a necessity during the summer months, but often wasn't used at all during the other times of years, which surprises me in Australia, you know, because I just thought it was like an all-round thing. Now, you all know how I feel about sunscreen. It should be an everyday thing, not just for those days when you need to go to the beach. And Ava and Beck felt the same. They thought it was important for people to wear sunscreen every day, all year round. UV rays don't stop damaging your skin just because it's winter, and pretty much every skincare expert will agree that sunscreen should be a non-negotiable if you want to protect your skin, depending on the UV index, and if you care about aging damage versus burning, you know. But especially if you live somewhere like Australia, which is where Ava and Beck call home. So they decided that they wanted to fix these problems with how sunscreen was perceived and marketed. They wanted to create sunscreen products that not only protected your skin from the sun, but also felt luxurious and comfortable to wear every single day. Sunscreen that looked good on your shelf, fit seamlessly into your skincare routine, and made people actually want to wear it rather than have to wear it. Speaking in an interview about the idea for the brand, Ava said, "We knew how important it was to wear sunscreen every day as part of a skincare routine, and we wanted to create an SPF product that looked and felt like a skincare product, something made from luxury ingredients that would sit nicely under makeup and wouldn't make your skin break out or become greasy." And honestly, I really like their sunscreens. I feel like they've hit the nail on the head with most of their sunscreens. So over the next 6 or 7 months or so, Ava and Beck started working out a business plan for the idea, spending their weekends at Beck's house and fine-tuning their plan on a whiteboard. This wasn't just some doodling and brainstorming though, you know, bits of colored craft paper. They were seriously trying to figure out how and if they could even make this idea work. It wasn't just about what their brand name would be, what their products would actually do, or what their packaging would look like. They didn't want to bring in any investors at at this stage. So it was also about how they would fund it all, if they could do what they wanted to do with the money that they could get, and whether or not they should give up their stable jobs to pursue this opportunity. Testing sunscreen, launching sunscreen is difficult and expensive, and that's why you see a lot of these celebrity skincare brands or new brands do not launch with a sunscreen. After months of work, they presented their ideas to family or friends and said, do we do this or not? And the response they got was hugely positive, with the people close to them believing that they were really onto something. Not only did they have this great idea, but they also had the skills to make it happen. So they decided to take the leap. With their combined savings and some help from family members, they managed to get together around 400,000 Australian dollars in order to get the brand off the ground. They spent over 2 years from that point working to get it right. That meant hundreds of hours searching manufacturers, collaborating with chemists, and testing over 100 different formula samples, trying to produce the product that they had set out to create. They were perfectionist about it. They needed to get this right, because if they couldn't create what they had envisioned, there was no point. This would just be more sunscreen. The idea of creating sunscreens that felt like serums or moisturizers that absorbed quickly, worked well with makeup, and didn't leave a white cast, that is what would set them apart from every other sunscreen brand out there, and there were lots. There are lots. And the perfectionism extended to the packaging as well. They wanted Ultra Violette to look as good as it would feel on your skin, instead of the generic beach vibes or, that white clinical sterile packaging. It's mostly like white and orange, isn't it? Because it's like sunny but clinical. Pretty much what most other brands were doing at the time. They wanted something fun, something that would stand out on the crowded shelves. So they leaned into bold colors with a slightly kind of retro look and feel. It was fun, but it's still very classy, which fit perfectly with what Ava and Beck wanted the brand to be. It was meant to be premium sunscreen for the skincare enthusiast, something that looked good next to your skincare products. It was at this time that they came up with their own term for what they were creating, skinscreen. Not just your basic sunscreen, but a product that blended the benefits of skincare actives with the serious sun protection of sunscreen. Again, they didn't want sunscreen to be this afterthought, something you had to do, but rather an essential in your skincare lineup. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Korean skincare already did exist at the time, but it wasn't as world-renowned as it is now, and Korean sunscreens already packed all these benefits. But they weren't mainstream. They were very basic, and the mineral ones definitely left a white cast. Eventually, 2.5 years after first coming up with the idea, Ava and Beck were almost ready to launch their new brand. But first they wanted to do like a small, soft launch to test things out and make sure they had got it right. So in December of 2018, they made 300 gift sets of their new products to give out to friends, family, and any industry insiders who wanted to try the products out. They initially thought that these 300 gift sets would last until their official launch, but that was before they sent one to Leigh Campbell, the executive editor of Mamma Mia, a popular lifestyle website in Australia. Now, Campbell wrote a glowing article about the brand, and all the gift sets were snapped up within a few hours once it came out. At the end of her article, Campbell said, "I've personally trialed all of the products, and I'm happy to say I think an iconic Aussie beauty brand may have just been born." And to be fair, she was probably right. Chapter 2: Launch and Early Days. After their very, very promising trial launch, Ultra Violette officially launched to the public in January of 2019, and it was immediately obvious that they were doing sunscreens differently. Unlike most other skincare brands, Ultra Violette's products weren't supposed to be a one-size-fits-all. They felt that sunscreen, just like other skincare products, needed to be created with a specific customer and skin type in mind, because everybody's skin is different. So their launch included 3 different facial sunscreens, each with different textures, finishes, and skin benefits, as well as 2 tinted SPF lip balms, all with a minimum SPF value of 30, but some as high as SPF 50+. Now, this lineup consisted of Skinscreen. This was considered, and probably still is considered, the hero product of the initial lineup. Skinscreen is a super lightweight serum textured sunscreen that felt more like a really light moisturizer, then sun protection, while still having a really good SPF rating of 50+. This is an oil-free formula that's designed to melt into the skin super quickly, and it does. It really does, providing a subtle glow without any greasiness. It can get a little bit greasy if you're oily, but it's a really nice texture. Formulated with those next-gen UV filters and a blend of vitamins, it's aimed to brighten, hydrate, and smooth the skin, and it was originally pitched as an alternative to like a primer for dry or dull skin. Supreme Screen, which is one of my favorite sunscreens of all time, this was more of an all-rounder. Supreme Screen was meant to be used as a daily moisturizer and primer kind of combination, whilst also providing sun protection, combining hydration, sun protection, and a primer into this really smooth textured cream, again with SPF 50+. It featured broad spectrum SPF UV filters alongside Kakadu Plum, which is a nice antioxidant, and Pentavitin for antioxidant support and moisture retention. And it was designed to feel light but nourishing, really aimed at normal to combination skin or drier skin types too. Clean Screen, this is a combination of mineral and chemical sunscreen with a lightweight gel texture. I think this is one of my favorites too. I'm looking around, I don't have a product in here at the moment. A fragrance-free formula with a slightly matter finish. It was meant for sensitive or reactive skin types that needed a low irritation option. The founders say that because it was a zinc-based formula, they kept the SPF at 30 to avoid making it too whitening, saying that the best SPF is the one that you wear daily. Sheen Screen, another great one, rounding out the initial lineup was Ultra Violette's SPF 30 tinted lip balms. Available in like a sheer peachy tone or a nude, these were included to offer both lip care and sun protection, something that's often overlooked. And right from the start, Ultra Violette's lineup was a hit. Their customer base grew so quickly, with consumers praising the brand's innovative formulas and new take on sunscreen. They loved having something that worked well with makeup, that didn't leave a strong white cast, that worked great with different skin types and skin concerns, that wasn't heavy or greasy. And of course, not everybody was blown away by Ultra Violette's products. No product is ever universally loved, right? But the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. This concept of having SPF to suit different people is so obvious, but not done. Like, no one does this. At that time anyway, it's so obvious. A lot of people just have that one-size-fits-all sunscreen, but to have sunscreens that suit different people's skins and concerns, like even within the ultraviolet lineup, there are sunscreens I cannot use because of my rosacea, because of my skin tone, because of my combination skin. But there are equally as many products that I can use because of my rosacea, because of my skin tone, because of my oily skin. It's just so obvious, but so genius at the same time. And it wasn't just the formulas that stood out to people. It was also the branding. The bold, colorful, but sleek tubes caught everyone's attention. It's that like blue combined with whatever color represents the sunscreen, and combined with that playful tone of voice that they use in the marketing, Ultra Violet really managed to stand out in a market that had until that point felt either too clinical, too basic, or too beachy. Their tone of voice was confident without sounding like they were preaching to you, bullying you into wearing sunscreen. Instead of heavily relying on scientific jargon or scaremongering, they were basically saying, sunscreen sucks, here's something better. Friendly, playful, but most of all accessible. People really connected with their messaging. And it played a major part in helping the brand gain a foothold in the industry. In those days, it also helped that they were available exclusively through their own website, rather than trying to get straight into major retailers. This allowed them to kind of like more closely control their image, their messaging at a crucial time for the brand. It really helped them build a community with their fans and to start educating customers about what made their skin screens different from traditional sunscreens. It all went pretty smoothly for the brand at the start, at least from an outsider's perspective. Within just a few weeks, there was a major buzz around Ultra Violet, with social media full of like flat lays, showing off the vibrant packaging, and early fans raving about how lightweight and wearable the formulas were. This hype grew even further when, after about 4 months, the brand secured a distribution deal with Adore Beauty, a leading online retailer in Australia. And major press coverage came very quickly too, with beauty editors and influencers across Australia talking about and praising the brand. brand. They pretty soon found themselves on several best new brand lists with major publications talking about Ultra Violette as a game changer in the sunscreen category. You know, for years, SPF had been that skincare step that people wanted to avoid in their routine, if possible, but now it was like the star. And by the end of their first year, Ultra Violette had carved out a niche as a brand that wasn't just selling sunscreen, it was reshaping the way people thought about it. And although they were rapidly gaining momentum in Australia, an even bigger opportunity for growth was on its way. In a year or so before the pandemic, beauty enthusiasts were starting to take sunscreen way more seriously. There was a growing awareness, especially amongst younger consumers, about the long-term effects of sun exposure, sun damage, and the importance of using a sunscreen on a daily basis. People were starting to shift away from saying, I know I should be wearing sunscreen, but I can't be bothered because it's gross. And more towards people saying, I know I have to wear sunscreen, what's the best one I can wear every day without hating it? And this shift actually became even more noticeable during the COVID pandemic that was just around the corner. The timing was perfect. Despite consumer opinions about sunscreen changing, most options at the time still felt like a chore to use. The beauty industry was ready for someone to come along and make sunscreen more exciting, more fun, a pleasure to use, and Ultra Violette was that brand. Chapter 3: Rise in Popularity. We all know by now that skincare saw a massive spike in popularity during the pandemic, and combined with the aforementioned increase of awareness of the importance of sunscreen, this was possibly the best time for a new brand to expand. And that's exactly what Ultra Violette did, and in February of 2020, Ultra Violette launched through Sephora Australia and New Zealand, both in their physical stores and online. Now, of course, the brand's availability in physical stores for the first time wasn't helped by the fact that the COVID lockdown in Australia was announced just 1 month later, but being available online in Sephora helped expand their reach massively. Now, something we don't always talk about when it comes to a brand's success or failure is pure luck. Nobody knew that the pandemic would have such a positive impact on the skincare industry. And even if they had known, Ultra Violette's expansion into Sephora would have taken months to finalize and plan. This was something that was already in the works before anyone even knew what COVID was. Ultimately, Ultra Violette got very, very lucky. I don't mean to downplay the work they put in, the innovative products they developed, or the clever marketing, the brand positioning, but we often overlook the part luck has to play in the success of brands. And obviously the pandemic brought its own set of problems for Ultra Violette to deal with, which they adapted to well, but they did also get lucky that their partnership with Sephora came at just the right time, when the popularity of sunscreens was about to explode. Their excellent timing again helped propel their growth throughout 2020 to 2022, with the brand really hitting their stride during this period. The success for their original lineup, particularly Screen, which had been a fan favorite from the start, was continued with newer product releases like Extreme Screen, another really good one, their first full body product with an SPF of 50+, and Dream Screen, a tinted SPF 50+ available in 11 shades, which was released near the end of 2021. Dream Screen went on to become another fan favorite, at least among some consumers, though it did lead to some controversy, which we'll get into later. And this success meant that Ultra Violette's SPF range quickly became some of the top selling products at Sephora Australia and New Zealand, and the brand earned a spot in Sephora's top 5 skincare brands in the Australia-New Zealand region by revenue. On top of that, in 2021, they finally went international. But most importantly, in 2021, they officially launched in the UK and Europe, becoming available in-store through Space NK as well as online with Cult Beauty and Net-a-Porter, and they followed that up in 2022 with expansion into Asia through Sephora and Joyce Beauty, making the brand available in markets like Hong Kong and Malaysia. The brand was successful in every new market it entered, particularly here in the UK, where their line of SPF sold out 6 times in the first 2 months after arriving. I remember we were waiting for them, and became one of Space NK's top selling sunscreens during the summer, and at one point they were reportedly selling a product every 2 minutes globally. Ultra Violette haven't openly released a lot of their sales figures, but reports have suggested they achieved an annual revenue of around 2.5 million Australian dollars in 2020. 2020, and that this had increased to around 12 million Australian dollars by the end of 2022, which is pretty good considering they started with just 400,000 Australian dollars just 4 years earlier. Between the start of 2020 and the end of 2022, Ultra Violette went from a cult Australian beauty brand to the new must-have sunscreen brand, or maybe even the first must-have sunscreen brand. I'm not sure I've ever seen this level of hype and excitement about sunscreen other than in K-beauty. And I guess that's exactly what Ultra Violette set out to achieve. SPF that isn't seen as a boring afterthought anymore. Their deal with Sephora and other major retailers combined with products that people had actually been asking for years, as well as their aesthetically pleasing branding and aspirational Australian cool girl image, all together helped position Ultra Violette as leaders in modern sun care, well before many other competitors had even caught on to what was happening. But as I mentioned earlier, it wasn't all positive, and the product that caused their first major controversy had already been released. And unfortunately, the criticism revolves around an issue that we've seen all too often in the beauty industry: a lack of inclusivity. Chapter 4: The controversies begin. When Ultra Violette launched their first tinted SPF Dream Screen in late 2021, it quickly became one of their standout products. It was a fusion of sunscreen and skin tint, offering a light coverage with high protection at SPF 50+, and people loved it. I'll be honest, I didn't like it. I found it very clingy. It clinged to my skin a lot because it was basically Queen Screen serum but with added pigment, essentially, in the sense that it had that nice, like, smooth, runny, non-sunscreeny texture. And it was apparently something that fans of the brand had been asking for since they first launched, and it was soon one of Ultra Violette's best-selling products. And it all seemed like once again they had managed to fill a gap in the market with a product that the beauty consumers had actually been waiting for. But despite the generally positive reception, there were some issues as well. Slowly but surely, more and more people started to complain about the limited shade range Dream Screen was available in. Of the 11 shades that were released, the vast majority leaned towards lighter complexions. There were only a couple of options for deeper skin tones, and even those weren't that deep. I'm looking at it now, like it's actually pretty ridiculous, but some defenders of the brand pointed out that 11 shades is actually pretty great for an SPF product, where most of the time companies will only offer a couple shades, if any at all, which is true. Sure, having 11 shades is good, especially back then. But as many critics rightfully, in my opinion, pointed out, the issue is the uneven distribution of those shades, not the overall number. There are 7 shades for lighter skin, I must say. 1, 2, 3 of them look the same. 4 of them look the same. The next 2 could be interchangeable, the next 3 could be interchangeable, but only 2 for medium and 2 for deeper skin tones. And there's not much of a jump between those mediums. There's not a huge difference in some of the lighter tones, so whether they were really necessary to include at the expense of a wider range of deeper tones is definitely questionable. So it's not surprising that consumers with medium to deeper skin tones felt excluded or like an afterthought for the brand. It felt like tokenism, not inclusion. And as often seems the case in these situations, the whole issue was made even worse by the brand's response. Many consumers called the brand out for allegedly responding passive-aggressively to critical comments on their Instagram posts, as well as allegedly deleting comments that criticized their shade range and pinning comments that defended them. Several women, black women, women of color, claimed that Ultra Violette actually blocked them after they publicly spoke out about their concerns. So at the time, it looked like rather than listening to people's concerns and engaging with their customers in a professional manner, the brand themselves opened them up to accusations that they were trying to avoid the conversation and silence the voices of people of color. Not a great look for a brand claiming to be inclusive. But if we're being honest, pretty much every brand claims to be inclusive these days, regardless of whether they actually are or not, and that becomes evident all the time. And even when founders Ava and Beck finally issued an official response to the situation, it wasn't received well. They tried to defend themselves, saying that the dark shades are sheer enough to be flexible on various deeper skin tones, and that they were planning on expanding the shade range to include more deeper tones in the future. Obviously, people weren't buying this, and I also don't think this is a justifiable excuse, with many pointing out that that reasoning should also apply to the light tones as well. So why are there so many lighter shade options? Why aren't people with lighter skin expected to make do with allegedly flexible shades that don't really match their skin tone? I mean, the lighter shades have undertones here by the looks of it. And others pointed out that starting with more lighter shades and only expanding into deeper shades just later on just shows where their priorities are. I think my brother Robert actually did a video on this where he mentioned how a lot of those lighter shades are sheer and interchangeable. When you are that light, you don't necessarily need these many options, so it doesn't make sense. And the controversy around the shade range and the brand's poor response to criticism also led some to scrutinize Ultra Violette more closely. There had also been a few people complaining that their products actually left a noticeable white cast on deeper skin tones, and that there was a questionable lack of diversity in the models used in their advertising campaigns, but the number of people bringing up these issues had increased in light of the shade range scandal. Eventually, Ultra Violette did expand the range about 6 months after the initial release. They added 4 new deeper shades and quietly rebranded it as Daydream Screen for some reason. I don't know. The new shades did help to make the line more accessible to people with deeper skin tones, and some did see it as a step in the right direction. This issue in particular seems to come up again and again in the beauty world, and I'm not sure why brands haven't yet realized that inclusivity and representation aren't just marketing buzzwords that let you pretend to be a company worth supporting, you know? They're important aspects of building a brand that is actually trusted and respected. I don't know how people look at that initial shade range and think that's okay. Like, it baffles me. Chapter 5, Making It in America. Despite experiencing their first major controversy and handling it quite poorly, Ultra Violette managed to continue their steady growth rate over the next few years. In September of 2023, they entered the Middle East market, again through a distribution deal with Sephora. They followed that up a few months later by announcing that they agreed to bring in outside investment for the first time. And in January of 2024, they confirmed that they had sold a minority stake to Area Group partners who have previously invested in brands like Hero Cosmetics and the Inky List in exchange for an investment of $15 million. And they had planned to use this money to help fund their upcoming expansion into North America, as well as to fund further product innovation, hoping to keep themselves at the forefront of the sunscreen industry. The brand had worked hard to establish themselves as a leader in modern sunscreens, and they were desperate to keep this position in the minds of consumers. The founders have stated regularly that they want to become the #1 premium SPF brand in the world. And to be fair, things were going well at this point. Despite their earlier controversy, Ultra Violette was at the time the 4th best-selling skincare brand at Space NK in the UK, and the 2nd best-selling skincare brand in Sephora in Australia. And it looked like things were only going to get better in the next couple of years. Their North American expansion started with their entry into Canada in March of 2024, obviously with Sephora again. Is Canada North America? Oh my God, why did I not know that? And this latest expansion went as well as all the others had, and by the end of 2024, Ultra Violette had achieved an annual revenue of over $20 million for the first time. With the company doing so well in all their existing markets, and with some of that investment money still waiting to be used, now seemed like the perfect time for the brand to finally make its debut in the US. So in March of 2025, Ultra Violette became available in 592 Sephora stores throughout the US, as well as on the Sephora website. They debuted with 5 facial, lip and body SPF products, including a US exclusive, the Vibrant Screen, which is a water-resistant SPF 50 hydrating lotion for the face and body. Ultra Violette had obviously avoided entering the US market until now because of the pretty archaic restrictions the US has on what UV filters can be used in sunscreens. The FDA currently only allows 16 UV filters to be used in SPF products, and only 2 of those, zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, are actually officially recognized by the FDA as safe and effective. They say they still need additional data for the other 14. As we know, the K-beauty sunscreen ban, they need to catch up. They're so old-fashioned. This means not only have there been no new UV filters allowed in the US since 1999, but 14 of the ones that are allowed are in a weird gray area where they aren't officially recognized as safe, but are still allowed at the moment. But that's all come into question with the recent ban of a lot of Korean sunscreens, which is a different video. Now, how Ultra Violette have apparently managed to reformulate their products to meet US FDA regulations while still keeping the same high performance without using modern cutting edge ingredients they do elsewhere, I'm not entirely sure, but they claim to have done it. In an interview with Forbes discussing the US launch, founder Beck Jefford said, "We set ourselves a challenge of picking our hero SKUs and reformulating them to US FDA requirements. The outcome we were looking for is, could our best Australian customers tell the difference between the US version and the Australian version? We gave ourselves a good year to play around and experiment and test and trial. Our Australian customers in a blind test could not tell the difference between the US version and the Australian version." Now, that all sounds great and stuff, but some consumers have still been skeptical about how Ultra Violette could possibly keep to the high standards of their original products when they aren't able to use these modern day filters. It's an interesting question, and one that becomes even more relevant when we talk about the brand's latest controversy. Chapter 6. Another controversy. On the 12th of June 2025, Australia's leading consumer advocacy group, Choice, dropped a bombshell on the sunscreen industry. They released a report claiming that they tested 20 popular sunscreens from a range of brands which claim to have an SPF rating of 50 or higher, and only 4 of those products actually produced the results that they claimed. A lot of popular sunscreens from big name brands were accused of failing to live up to expectations. Bondi Sands had 2 products involved in the testing, with both falling short. Both claimed to have an SPF rating of 50 plus, but one got a score of 32 and the other as little as 26. Bondi Sands seems to pop up in these kind of testings a lot. Banana Boats was a similar story. 2 products tested, both claiming to be an SPF 50 plus. One came back as 35 and the other came back as 28. And the Cancer Council had it even worse, whose sunscreens I actually love. 4 of their products were tested with only 1 living up to its rating. The rest got scores of 33, 27 and 24. But worst of all was Ultra Violette's Lean Screen. Of the 16 products that failed to live up to expectations, Lean Screen's result was the most shocking. Despite being marketed as having an SPF rating of 50 plus, Choice revealed that their test returned an SPF rating of just 4. This rating was so low that Choice actually sent a sample to another lab in Germany just to double check the results. They were like, this can't be right. And that came back with an SPF rating for Lean Screen of 5. So slightly better, I guess, but not the rating they promised. Needless to say, Ultra Violette fans were shocked. A drop from a rating of 50 plus to just 4 or 5 would be bad enough for any sunscreen product, but considering that Ultra Violette's products aren't cheap, it was even more disappointing to consumers. Ultra Violette obviously immediately rejected these findings, the same day releasing a statement saying that they did not accept the results as even remotely accurate, and accusing Choice of releasing misleading information in the interest of generating headlines. They also reminded people that the TGA, or the Therapeutic Goods Association, is the governing authority over sunscreens in Australia, not Choice magazine. And they insisted that their original testing for Lean Screen in 2021 had provided results of SPF 64.32. And also, when they retested it again in 2024, the results were similar for UVB, and they also received a UVA rating of PA4 pluses, which is the highest possible. And to be fair to them, in the interest of transparency, they did actually provide links to the reports for the testing in 2021 and 2024, which appear to confirm the results that they claim. And they didn't stop there. They also insisted that the testing methodology used by Choice was flawed. For instance, the one that also brought up a lot of questions for readers and consumers was that they decanted the sunscreen into amber glass jars for testing, which Ultra Violette claimed could have destabilized their zinc-based formula. We'll talk about that more in a bit. Co-founder Ava Chandler Matthews even took to Instagram and TikTok, explaining that Lean Screen contains nearly 23% zinc oxide, and saying that the lab testing panels from Choice were smaller than industry standard. Apparently, for one of the tests Choice did, they only used 5 participants, and 2 of the results were considered non-validated. It's kind of unclear why, I'm not sure why. So the sample size they actually used was only from 3 people, which technically is not good enough. But despite this pushback from Ultra Violette, Choice really stood their ground. Their CEO, Ashley De Silva, claimed that their testing followed Australian sunscreen standards, saying that they use independent labs in Australia and Germany, and that decanting samples for testing is standard practice. He also reiterated that the second test in Germany confirmed the result and that effectively ruled out the possibility of lab errors or odd batches. Choice also called on the Therapeutic Goods Administration and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commissions to open compliance reviews and verify manufacturers' claims in the light of these results. The TGA has acknowledged the discrepancies and confirmed that they have launched their own investigation. While noting that SPF testing can vary from person to person, they confirmed that the sunscreen labeling is strictly regulated and that manufacturers must hold evidence to back up their SPF claims, or risk enforcement. Now, they're actually the authority over these issues in Australia, and their investigation is still going on at the moment. So we'll kind of just have to wait and see what they decide and what's going on there and what these repercussions are, if any. Right now, things are a little bit up in the air, but when it comes to public opinion, a lot of people seem to have already made their minds up. A lot of beauty consumers, especially long-term customers who relied on Ultra Violette for daily protection for years, were shocked and understandably worried with the news. Within hours, Ultra Violette's comments section on social media were full of customers expressing their concerns about the results of the report, with some even calling for Ultra Violette products to be pulled from the shelves until the TGA confirmed that they were safe. Okay, so now that we've talked about the Ultra Violette controversy and the test results from Choice, let's wrap that up with two expert takes from people who actually know their stuff. Two of my favorite creators in the industry. First, let's start with cosmetic chemist Ava Perkins. Now, Ava reviewed the full SPF test reports released by Choice and really did offer some much needed nuance. While some people have criticized Choice for decanting the sunscreens into amber glass bottles before testing, Ava actually pointed out that this is kind of standard practice to minimize bias. In fact, Choice used the same process for all sunscreens they tested, not just Ultra Violette. Now, Ava has actually posted before content warning people not to decant sunscreens into materials like silicones, like those silicone squeezy tubes you get off Amazon, which are porous and can actually compromise the formula. But in this case, Choice used inert photostable glass, which according to Ava is a much safer alternative. Alternatively, when some of the sunscreens were tested in clear glass instead of amber, the SPF values actually increased.
I've been seeing everyone's comments being like, see, you decanted the packaging, you shouldn't have done this, this is your fault. Y'all love to hate this, but I'm gonna provide some nuance. I'm the girly pop that has the published research talking about why we should not be decanting our products into alternative packaging, especially these silicone ones. They're very porous. I want to point to these results. We tested the sunscreens in clear glass packaging and we found that the SPF actually increased. We hypothesized that this was because the zinc oxide clumped or was more concentrated in one phase after separation over time. And this is what's not clicking for me. To go from SPF of 50 to 4 is really drastic. That means the zinc oxide must have clumped so badly that all of it fell to the bottom of the packaging and they did not remix it, or when they remixed it, it for some reason did not disperse back, or the zinc oxide grew legs and walked away.
Now, Ava suggests that this could be due to zinc oxide separating and clumping into one phase, which could make the product more concentrated in certain areas. Still, she admits that the drop from SPF 50 to 4 is extreme, possibly caused by poor remixing or significant ingredient separation. And at the end of the day, Ava believes that both Choice and Ultra Violette are doing the right thing. Choice is standing by their testing claims, their testing protocol, and Ultra Violette has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on additional testing and at reputable labs. But Ava also cautions that we likely won't get full clarity until new in vivo testing results are available, and that takes time. So now patience is key. We now, of course, have to move on to Dr. Michelle Wong, aka Lab Muffin Beauty Science. Dr. Michelle Wong explains that SPF testing is actually a lot less exact than most people realize. These tests are done on real people under lab conditions using UV lamps, and even tiny variables like how the sunscreen is applied, the subject's skin tone, or even the lighting in the room can drastically affect the results. In fact, for a standard SPF 50 test sunscreen, Michelle notes that the correct result can fall anywhere between SPF 44 and 82, to and still be considered accurate. In fact, one study she references found SPF scores ranging from 25 to 100 for the same sunscreen across different labs. And that's just the reality of how variable the testing is, even when nothing goes wrong. Despite that, Michelle says the choice results are actually encouraging. 19 out of 20 sunscreens scored over SPF 24, which is better than most past consumer tests. She also points out that Choice use a lab known for giving slightly lower SPF scores than average, which actually makes the results even more impressive. Mineral sunscreens, Michelle adds, tend to perform worse in SPF testing due to their formulation, which might explain why none of them surpass an SPF 40 in the report. But the real issue is not testing, it's how we use sunscreen. One long-term study Michelle cites actually showed that people using SPF 16 consistently had reduced skin cancer risk and no visible skin aging. So, are the results worth paying attention to? Absolutely, of course. But before we panic, let's also recognize the limits of SPF testing and make sure we're applying enough product in the first place. I think Michelle's general consensus is stop using Ultra Violette for now, stop using any of the listed sunscreens for now, until we have further information, which I think is probably the most sensible way to go. To be honest, this is one of those things that is hard to fight as a brand, because even if it's confirmed that the results were inaccurate and Lean Screen does provide the protection it claims, the negative press is already out there and not everyone is going to be paying attention to the updates on this issue. People are just gonna be like, well, that doesn't work and move on. And sunscreens are also one of those products that people would rather just not take the risk with. So a lot of people will probably just move on to a different brand altogether, regardless of what comes of all this in the end anyway. One thing is for sure though, the timing of this controversy couldn't have been worse. I spoke earlier about how we often overlook the role luck plays in a brand's success. Well, it seems like Ultra Violette's luck may have just run out. When the brand first launched in the US, the founders often spoke in interviews about how important this move was for them and how their main focus for 2025 was to establish themselves as a trusted brand in the US. It was a big deal for the brand, with the US market being such an important one, such a big one as well. Ava Matthews even said in an interview about the US expansion that we're really not prepared to fuck this up. Well, prepared or not, it isn't looking good at the moment. Just as they were beginning their attempt to find a footing in the US, trust in the brand has been shattered. And it remains to be seen if they can rebuild from this. It's still early days. And despite this, they have launched a new sunscreen, which I'll be honest, absolutely stinks, but it's very, very good. It feels very nice. It doesn't sting my skin. You know, they're still launching despite the current controversy and mistrust surrounding their products. From what I've seen, the general consensus is that a lot of industry experts, skinfluencers are still using Ultra Violette because they are a trusted brand and they know the nuance of SPF testing. But where does Ultra Violette go from here? After 6 years of fairly rapid growth and steady success, the brand now finds itself in trouble. Trust from consumers has definitely been dented. For a brand whose entire identity is built around the importance of good sun protection, having one of their hero products questioned so publicly and so damningly is a big problem. At the start of 2025, experts estimated that Ultra Violette were expected to do 33 million in net sales by the end of the year, with US sales expected to account for around 8.5 million of that, but that was before the latest controversies. So it could be possible that 2025 might be the first time that the brand fails to improve on results from the previous financial year. They are undoubtedly a pioneer of the skin screen concept, and they've helped change how sunscreens are viewed by a lot of people. But is that enough to keep people invested in Ultra Violette, seeing as there are so many amazing sunscreens available now? Or will they just move on to the growing list of competitors who are releasing similar products? The beauty industry never stops, and although the idea of sunscreen combined with skincare actives was innovative when Ultra Violette launched 6 years ago, they aren't the only brand offering these kind of products anymore. And crucially, these other brands aren't in the middle of a controversy surrounding the SPF ratings, the effectiveness of their product. Okay, future me here. Here's the latest update on this whole SPF scandal situation. So on Friday, today is Sunday the 24th when I'm posting this video. On the Friday just gone, Ultra Violette officially announced that they are going to be pulling Lean Screen from the shelves effective immediately. So if you have it, get rid of it. And this comes after weeks really of back and forth following Choice's pretty bombshell huge SPF investigation that we discussed earlier in this video that happened earlier this year, where, as I mentioned, Lean Screen tested as an SPF 4 in one test and 5 in another instead of the SPF 50 plus that they advertise. And at the time, Ultra Violette strongly rejected those findings, saying that they weren't even remotely accurate. They obviously had a lot of faith in their product and were very passionate about it. And what I will say is this does sound like a manufacturer issue rather than a brand issue, which we'll talk about in a bit. But now, after commissioning 8 more independent tests at multiple labs, the results are in for the Lean Screen, and honestly, they're all over the place. Lean Screen has come back with SPF results of 4, 10, 21, 26, 33, 60, 61, and 64. And honestly, I think when the numbers are swinging around that much, it just means you cannot guarantee reliable protection. So in a statement, the founders, Ava Chandler Matthews and Beck Jefford, admitted that the product didn't meet their standards, apologized to customers, and they're offering full refunds. They also told customers to stop using the product, which isn't exactly what you want to hear when you've been using the product for years. What's interesting here is that they were very clear that this issue only applies to Lean Screen, not the rest of their line. And they explained that unlike the other products, Lean Screen was developed by a third-party manufacturer called Wild Child, and that it was the only ultraviolet formula made by them, which is great, because I love their other sunscreens. And that product also went under the name Velvet Screen in the US, which is now being withdrawn too. So Ultra Violette has confirmed that they won't be working with that manufacturer anymore, or the testing lab they use, Princeton Consumer Research, ever again. Now here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. Wild Child doesn't just manufacture for Ultra Violette, they're also behind the sunscreens for Naked Sundays, another SPF brand that has pretty much exploded in popularity over the past few years, and I really like a lot of their products too. But they also make a wide range of white label sunscreen formulations that other smaller brands can essentially just slap their logo on. So that doesn't automatically mean that Naked Sundays or other Wild Child products are affected in the same way, but it does highlight a much bigger issue. If one lab or one manufacturer is turning out inconsistent results, then potentially a whole bunch of different sunscreens on the market could be compromised too. And really that is the real worry here. Choice tested 20 sunscreens earlier this year and found that 16 of them failed to meet the SPF claims on their label, the worst offender being Ultra Violette's Lean Screen. But as I'm pretty sure I mentioned in the video earlier, I filmed this video like 3 weeks ago, I don't remember anymore. Bondi Sands, Banana Boat, and the Cancer Council also had products that performed way below SPF 50, yet Ultra Violette seems to be the only brand so far to actually retest their product, publish the results, and pull it from the shelves and offer refunds. And to be honest, I didn't love Ultra Violette's initial defensive reaction when the Choice report first dropped. I do feel like it came out of a place of passion for their brand, and I feel like they genuinely thought they had done everything that they could do to make sure their products were the best they can be. But the initial result kind of felt more like damage control. But looking at how things have played out since, I do think they've taken more responsibility than the competitors that featured in the Choice publication too. They spent time and a lot of money on independent testing, admitting the problem, and pulled the product. But still, the fact that Lean Screen could return results anywhere from SPF 4 to 64 isn't just bad luck. It's a sign of a broken system, a very troublesome, terrifying, broken system. The TGA have already admitted that variability in SPF testing is a known issue, and they're now reviewing whether Australia's testing standards are even reliable, which is terrifying, seeing as Australia is the sun on earth. If they find that labs like Princeton Consumer Research have been producing questionable results for multiple brands, we could see a much wider shakeup across the sunscreen industry. And of course, Dr. Michelle Wong has spoken up about this. She pretty much hit the nail on the head before all these new updates, but she does mention that PCR are kind of a bit sus, but I'll leave her to talk about that because I don't know much about that, but she seems to be raising some red flags about PCR in general. So for now, Ultra Violette is trying to draw a line under this by removing Lean Screen completely and reassuring people that their other products have passed testing and remain safe to use. I do think this may be a fair bit of damage to their reputation, but I think they're okay. As I mentioned in the video, they've launched another sunscreen since, which is really good, and I'm still using that. I've sworn by a fair few of their sunscreens. We'll see. Is a brand I'm going to continue to use. Whilst I mentioned that the other brands haven't really spoken up or done much, to be fair, they didn't quite test at SPF 4, so as long as you're continuously reapplying those other sunscreens, you're going to be fine. But what I do like is when a brand is involved in some controversy, is that they talk is that they talk us through it, which I feel like Ultra Violette have done. They told us what's happened, what they're going to do, what is going on, and then now what they have done. And for me, that is much more of a green flag, despite the massive red flag. If that makes sense. A brand who quickly and openly resolves an issue, and whilst not immediately, eventually admits to wrongdoing, even though it wasn't necessarily on their behalf. I prefer that much more than a brand who just stays quiet and tries to sweep things under the rugs, and then eventually comes out with a new sunscreen a year down the line. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. I just realized I'm in my pajamas. Yeah, that's it. I'll see you next time.